My hand hurts. My injury can kind of flare up with the changing seasons and also playing too much, or if I haven't played in a while. It is bothering me and it's lame. But then I figured, maybe I could tell you a little bit about that injury and what I learned from it, and we can go out on the road and hang out while we're at it. So there we go. One thing that I learned, and if you don't get anything else from this video, I would say rest. If you're in pain, don't play. If it hurts, don't play. After my initial injury, I had like 3 weeks of gigs booked, and I actually went to a hand surgeon. He said, it's fine, it's not broken. He gave me a shot to bring the swelling down and said, just go play. And I did that, and I played through the pain, and I did that for a few months. Went to a different doctor months later who said I'd been overdoing it, I've been doing too much, and I should just rest for 3 months and not play at all, which I did. But at that point, it didn't help, and I think the damage had been done. I'd been doing too much too soon, and now I deal with like scar tissue and arthritis in this joint, and it still doesn't feel right like years later. I feel like I overdid it too soon, and I didn't rest when I should. My advice to you is if you're in pain, if you're in physical pain, just stop. It's not worth it. Come back to it later. Music will always be there. Opportunities will always be there. But if you overdo it, you may be hindering your long-term musical ability. It's just not worth it. Okay, another thing that I learned, and it's kind of related to that first one, is you can do some other things outside of your primary instrument that are going to help you become a more well-rounded musician while you rest. So for example, I did a bunch of gigs on synth bass. In the process, I learned a lot about keyboards and synthesis. I also was running sound and learning about signal flow and gain staging and running the board, which is always a good thing to know. And I also, I learned some stuff about building basses. Like I bought a cheap Squier and totally gutted it, refinished it, changed the finish on it, changed the pickups. And then I started experimenting with different types of strings and setups, and I learned a lot about how instruments work and how you can make them feel and sound different ways by changing them in different ways. What I'm saying is you don't have to waste that rest time. You can use your energy and your focus on something else that's related to what you already do. It's going to help you become a more well-rounded musician, and it will inform your decisions later down the road. Okay, another thing that I learned from my hand injury is that you don't have to be a full-time musician to be a real musician. What do I mean by that? I remember I used to hold really tightly to the idea that like, because I'm a full-time bass player that makes my money playing bass and helps pay our bills playing bass, and I'm giving my career to this pursuit of this craft, because of that, I'm a musician. I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think you have to be a full-time musician to be a real musician, or it makes you any more legitimate or like good even. Some of my favorite musicians that I've played with, that I most enjoyed playing music with, have been not full-time gigging musicians. And some of the musicians that I've least enjoyed playing music with are full-time musicians that have become burnout and jaded and negative. I'm reminded of Wes Montgomery, who's a famous jazz guitar player. He was a factory worker. He was a blue-collar worker. He would work in the factory all day, and then he would play jazz at night. He's one of the most important guitar players in like jazz guitar history. And I don't think the fact that he was a blue-collar worker primarily belittles that or makes him less of a musician. I'll also say the musician lifestyle is pretty brutal. Like the hand injury was the catalyst that made me step back, but I wasn't making a lot of money. I was barely making ends meet, and it was hard. It was always a grind. Also, it was hard on our marriage. I was gone like every weekend and a lot of weeks, and I just didn't see my wife a lot. And that was a lot of our 20s, was like not seeing each other, because I was trying to make this work. I was working really hard at music, but it meant I was gone a lot. And I think me stepping back has actually been really good for my life and for my happiness. I don't think you need to do music full time. It was exhausting. Like I remember, and also like I feel like it took me out of the moment sometimes. Like I remember I'd be on a gig and I'd be like looking at my watch, like, okay, I have to get to the other side of town. We need to wrap this up. Or oh, tomorrow morning I have to get up at 6 a.m. for sound check. And like, it just was like a grind. Whereas like now I feel like anytime I play music, it's like a special, precious blessing. It's like a moment to cherish, and I feel like I'm more in the moment. So I don't think you have to do one or the other. I'm just saying you don't have to do it full time to enjoy it more, or to even to be better at it. I don't think it makes you any more legitimate or more real of a musician if you're doing it full time. Another thing I learned from my hand injury is playing simple is not a bad thing. Like I can't play as quickly as I used to, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Now I try to approach coming up with bass parts, this is cheesy, but like almost like a haiku, like, you know, that poetry concept where you like try and say the most beautiful thing you can with the least amount of words. I try to approach bass playing that way, where I can't do much, but I'll try and do the best thing I can with the limited mobility that I have. And I think that's actually improved me as a bass player. Also, no shade if you are a really technically proficient bass player. I have a lot of respect for musicians like that. No shade if that's what you do. But I think it's been good for me to try and simplify my playing, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for a bass player. And another one that I learned is that sometimes you can't make it alone. I remember when I hurt my hand, I couldn't work for a few months, and it was really hard for financial reasons and emotional reasons. And all during that time, my wife was a rock. She was rock solid. She worked really hard. She was providing for us. And it's just a reminder that sometimes we can't make it alone. The most important thing in our lives are the people. My wife is the most important thing in my life. She's amazing. I have amazing friends, an amazing family. And at the end of the day, I think that is the most important thing. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but I just think it's true. I can hear them there buzzing, and I ain't done nothing since I woke up today. How the hell can a person go to work in the morning and come home in the evening with nothing to say? Another thing that I learned is if you have to pivot, you can. I think sometimes musicians are ashamed to have to do something besides music, and I had to do that, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because what I learned is that if you're a musician, I know a few things about you already. I know you are probably creative, you're probably self-motivated and self-disciplined, you're probably analytical, you probably have some technical skills, you probably have some social skills or social media skills. You know how to teach yourself things, and you know how to solve problems. And all of those things, you might have learned them from music, but those are things that can work for anything. I'm going to give a shout out to a friend of mine and a mentor. When I decided to pull back from playing music full time, I started working in the film industry, and I actually met a fellow musician, my friend Marcus. He's actually an amazing drummer. He used to be a session drummer for Rick Beato and used to play drums for Zach Brown. But now he's a sound mixer for television and film. He basically took me under his wing and trained me as his boom operator. So now I work in the film industry, capturing all the dialogue on set. And I didn't know it at the time, but the things that I was learning from music were also teaching me to do other things. So I'm not saying you have to pivot, but what I'm saying is you don't have to be scared of pivoting, because you probably have been learning some really helpful things along the way, and you're probably more equipped than you think you are. Last thing, if you are a musician that is dealing with an injury right now, I know that sucks for a lot of reasons, and I'm sorry that you're dealing with it. And I wish I had the perfect thing to say to you, and I don't. Because I wish I could say everything's going to be okay and you're going to be fine. But I don't know what's going to happen for you. I don't know what you're dealing with. Maybe you'll be back to 100%. Maybe you'll lose something. Or maybe you'll have to step away totally. I don't know. But I do know this. You are more than what you do. Your ability doing a certain thing, you may find your identity in it right now, but that's not all you are. And if you need to do something else, I bet you'll be able to find something that you're really good at and that you might enjoy. But I just want to remind you that your musical ability and your musical identity isn't the only thing that makes you you. And I do think that you're going to be okay. So in the meantime, I would just say rest and enjoy life and explore other creative endeavors that might be parallel or adjacent to your musical journey, and just take some time. And I think everything will work out, even if it's not the way that you think it will.